Her heart pounded relentlessly, like a caged bird frantically battering against its prison. A cold, sticky sheen of sweat formed on her brow, as if the dawn's dew had settled there instead. Ina clenched her trembling hands into fists, her nails biting into the soft flesh of her palms, leaving faint pink trails behind. The pain barely registered. Only the relentless pounding in her temples and the suffocating weight lodged in her throat, stealing her breath. She let her gaze drift to the courtroom. To where he sat. Valera. He seemed to sense her eyes on him, his head turning sharply in her direction. Their eyes locked. He froze, like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. Then slowly, he gave her a nod. A nod of encouragement. On his face played a faint, familiar smile, one so warm and ingrained in her memory that for a fleeting moment, she forgot where she was. "It'll be okay, darling," the nod seemed to whisper. "Justice will prevail." She wanted to respond, to mirror his reassurance with her own smile, but her lips felt numb, as though bound by invisible ice. She swallowed hard, though the lump in her throat only swelled. Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly dropped her gaze to hide her weakness. Not now. Not here. The door to the courtroom creaked open, a sound sharp and unyielding. The judge entered, her robes flowing like a black tide. The room rose in unison, as decorum dictated. Ina rose too, her legs unsteady, like they might give out beneath her at any moment. Her body no longer felt her own, stiff and uncooperative, as if she were an unwilling spectator to her own story. The judge, a weary-looking woman with a stern face framed by round glasses, adjusted the papers before her, papers that bore the fate of a young woman etched in black ink. Ina's heart raced so hard she could feel it throbbing against her ribcage, as though it might leap free altogether. Her breath hitched, shallow and irregular. She kept her eyes on the judge, unable to look away, awaiting the words that would determine the course of her life. "The court finds," the judge began, her tone void of emotion, each word deliberate, "the defendant, Ina Dmitrievna Medvedeva, guilty of the offense under Section." Ina's vision blurred, her mind struggling to grasp the gravity of those words. Guilty. They said she was guilty. No, this couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. She wouldn't ever. The rest of the judge's words melted into a haze of indistinct noise. "Sentencing the defendant to 5 years of incarceration in a general regime correctional facility," she declared, her voice distant, muffled, like an echo from underwater. The sharp crack of the gavel struck Ina like a bolt of lightning, her entire body jolting in response. Was that the sound of her life shattering? She turned instinctively, searching for Valera's face one last time, but the guards were already leading her away. Everything happened so fast. In an instant, she found herself in the back of a prison transport vehicle. And then, in a place she never thought she'd end up. Behind the gates. Her time in the detention center was nothing short of hell on earth. The space was cramped, suffocating, and overcrowded with people. Some wailed, others sobbed, and a few groaned in despair. The guards watched her with cold, unyielding eyes, forcing her to rise at dawn and forbidding her from lying down on the bunk until lights out. All she had was a backless stool, and even leaning against the wall was strictly prohibited. Ina had never been one for physical endurance. She had spent her days as an office accountant, indulging in coffee breaks with pastries and gossiping with colleagues. The harsh new reality hit her like a freight train. The guards, as if unsatisfied with their usual torment, would sometimes blast deafening music that pounded against her eardrums, gnawing at her sanity. But the prison itself was eerily silent. A silence so oppressive it felt heavier than the noise. The vast, cold space of the prison terrified her. She feared the other inmates. How could she possibly live among them? Among those who were here for real crimes? She had never hurt a fly in her life, and now she was forced to coexist with hardened criminals. Her first encounter happened during the yard time. Ina sat timidly on a weathered wooden bench, her eyes darting around nervously. Her gaze betrayed her fear and uncertainty. "Well, hello there, Buttercup," a voice broke through the silence. A woman with a sly grin plopped down beside her. "Name's Katya." "Hi," Ina replied hesitantly, her voice trembling. Katya lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the tattoos peeking out from under her collar. She took a long drag and offered the cigarette to Ina with a nod. "Smoke." Ina shook her head quickly, her eyes fixed on the intricate ink that seemed to tell stories of their own. "Then talk," Katya said, exhaling a cloud of grayish smoke. What's your name? Where are you from? What landed you here? Ina blinked rapidly, her mind racing. What do you mean? Relax, I'm not gonna rough you up, Katya said with a smirk, her tone almost patient. Look at you, shaking like a leaf in the wind. Ina tried to smile, but it came out crooked and unnatural. She could feel her body trembling, her heart still pounding like a drum. She was here, among these people, and she had to learn how to survive in this harsh, unforgiving world. But how? How could she possibly do it? Ina froze. The heart that had been racing moments ago now seemed to stop altogether. The world around her blurred into a fog. The sounds of the yard, the voices of the other inmates, even the faint echoes of Valera's breath, all of it faded away. Only his voice remained, cutting through the haze like a thunderclap in a clear sky. Inachka, I'm guilty, Valera repeated, his voice trembling as though he himself couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. It was me. I poisoned Dmitri Petrovich. I didn't mean to kill him. I thought he'd just get sick, maybe have a stomachache, something mild. But I didn't mean for this to happen. Ina stared at him, frozen in place. Her lips quivered, but no words came. She wanted to scream, to strike him, to demand how he could have done such a thing. But all she managed was a whisper. Why? Valera lowered his head, his hands clenching into fists. The apartment, he murmured. I thought, if he died we'd get it. We could start over. Inachka. I wanted us to have everything. But I never wanted you to end up here. I didn't think it would turn out like this. Ina felt her body begin to tremble. At first, it was subtle, but it grew stronger with each passing second. She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms, but she didn't feel the pain. All she felt was emptiness. Emptiness and a searing ache that tore through her chest. You knew they'd blame me? She finally managed to choke out. You knew I'd take the fall for what you did? Valera didn't answer. He just sat there, his head bowed, as if bracing himself for her to strike him. But Ina didn't. She couldn't. She simply stared at him, tears streaming down her face, and she didn't even bother to wipe them away. I waited for you, she whispered. I waited for you to come, to tell me it would all be okay. I believed in you, Valera. I believed. He lifted his eyes to meet hers, and the pain in them was so raw that it nearly made her scream. I didn't know what to do, he whispered. I wanted to fix it, but I couldn't. I couldn't, Inachka. Ina closed her eyes. She didn't want to look at him anymore. She didn't want to hear another word. All she wanted was for this nightmare to end. But it wasn't ending. It was only just beginning. Leave, she whispered. Just leave. Valera froze, as if he hadn't understood her. Inachka. Leave, she shouted, her voice so loud that even the guard by the door flinched. I don't want to see you. Ever. Valera rose to his feet, his face pale and his hands trembling. He cast one last look at her, his lips parting as if to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Then, without another glance, he turned and walked toward the door. Ina watched him go, feeling as if something inside her was tearing apart. Her life, her love, her faith. It had all collapsed in a single moment. She was alone. Completely, utterly alone. She closed her eyes and let her head fall against the table. Tears streamed down her cheeks, yet she made no effort to wipe them away. She just sat there and cried. Cried for the father she had lost. Cried for the husband who had betrayed her. Cried for herself, for the broken life that was now hers. Ina, are you okay? Came Katya's voice, filled with concern. How are you holding up? Ina lifted her head to look at her new friend. Katya stood nearby, her expression full of worry. Ina wanted to say she was fine, to assure her she'd manage, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was shake her head. Katya sat beside her and pulled her into a warm embrace. It's going to be okay, she whispered softly. You're strong. You'll get through this. Ina wanted to believe her. She truly did. But in that moment, all she felt was an overwhelming emptiness, a void that seemed to swallow her whole. Yet even in that emptiness, somewhere deep within, a spark flickered. A spark of hope. Hope that one day, this nightmare would end. Hope that she could start over. Hope that justice would prevail. And as long as that spark burned, Ina knew she couldn't give up. She wouldn't. She had to fight. For herself. For her life. For the truth. And she would fight. When the car finally pulled up, a battered vehicle that had clearly seen better days, Katia waved energetically from the driver's seat, her smile wide and unabashed. "Well, Buttercup, ready to head home?" she hollered. Ina froze for a brief moment, staring at her friend, who had become almost like a sister over the years. She hadn't expected Katia to be there, waiting for her. But there was something so genuine about the gesture that a lump formed in her throat. She nodded, brushed away a stray tear, and climbed into the car. "Well, how are you feeling?" Katia asked as they set off. "Look at you. I told you, you're a top model now." Ina managed a smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "Thanks, Katia. You have no idea how much it means to me to see you." Katia chuckled softly, but her eyes sparkled with warmth. "Come on, Buttercup, don't fall apart on me now. You're free. And you know what? You're strong. You went through hell and came out the other side. Things are only going to get better from here." Ina turned her gaze to the window. The road stretched ahead, lined with trees swaying gently in the wind, beneath a sky that seemed impossibly bright and alive. Everything looked so vibrant, so real. She inhaled deeply, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. She was free. But what now? "Katia," she said softly, "what happens next? I don't even know where to go." Katia frowned, but just for a moment. "Don't overthink it for now. First you rest. Stay with me. We'll figure it out later. You're not alone, I've got your back." Ina glanced at her friend, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Katia was right. She wasn't alone. And that was already more than she had dared to hope for. The first few days of freedom were surreal. Ina had grown used to the rigid routines, the constant noise of the prison corridors, the ever-present company of other people. Now, the silence and solitude felt almost eerie. But Katia was always there, helping her adjust, cracking jokes, making her laugh. Bit by bit, she felt herself starting to breathe again. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table with cups of steaming tea, Katia broke the quiet. "So, what about Valera? Have you thought about him?" Ina flinched. She had tried to avoid thinking about him. But Katia was right. It was something she couldn't avoid forever. "I don't know," she replied quietly. He betrayed me. He killed my father. But I can't just erase him from my life. It's too complicated." Katia nodded, her face turning serious. "I get it. But remember this, Buttercup, you don't owe him anything. You're strong. You'll make it through this. And if you want, we'll find a way to prove your innocence." Ina met Katia's gaze. "Do you think it's possible?" Katia smiled. "Anything's possible. But first, you need to figure out what you want. Are you ready to fight? Or do you just want to start over?" Ina fell silent, lost in thought. She didn't have the answer yet. But one thing she knew for certain. She was no longer the same woman who had walked into that prison. She had grown stronger. And she wasn't about to give up. A few months passed. Ina found work at a small sewing workshop. She loved the craft, finding solace in the rhythm of her stitching. It felt like her way of staying connected to the parts of herself she valued most. Katia supported her every step of the way, and slowly, life began to take shape again. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Katia broke the silence. "You know, Buttercup, I'm proud of you," she said, her voice steady and warm. "You've been through so much, but you didn't break. You're a real hero." Ina smiled softly. "Thank you, Katia. But I couldn't have done it without you." Katia scoffed lightly. "Oh, you'd have managed. You're stronger than you think. But I'm glad I was here with you." Ina turned her gaze back to the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, as if nature itself was celebrating the close of another day. A sense of calm began to settle within her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was ready for it. She was ready to live. And at that moment, as she watched the sunset, Ina realized that, despite everything she had endured, life could still be beautiful. She stood there now, the same Ina he had once betrayed, abandoned, and left alone to face the walls of a prison. The same woman whose life he had shattered. But this Inna was different. Stronger. Confident. And now, the savior of his daughter. Inna! Valera's voice quivered as he spoke, the disbelief clear in his tone. He couldn't trust his own eyes. She wasn't the same. The woman he had once known no longer existed. In her place was someone who had walked through fire and emerged more formidable than ever. Inna looked at him, her face calm yet unreadable. But in her eyes, there was an unmistakable depth of pain. She didn't say a word, just lowered her gaze. There was nothing she needed to say. Her expression alone spoke volumes. "Valera, do you know her?" Karina asked, still cradling her child in her arms. Her voice was filled with curiosity and surprise. Valera froze, the words stuck in his throat. How could he explain that the woman who had just saved his daughter's life was his ex-wife? How could he tell her that he was the one who had ruined her life? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sensing his hesitation, Inna decided to take control of the situation. "We used to know each other," she said quietly, her voice calm but tinged with a faint tremor. "A long time ago." Karina looked at her, then at Valera, trying to piece together the fragments of a story she didn't yet know. But before she could ask another question, Inna had already turned to the manager. "I need to get back to the kitchen," she said firmly. "There's still a lot of work to do." The manager nodded, still shaken by the dramatic events. "Of course, Inna. And thank you. You're a real hero today." Inna offered a faint smile, one that carried a hint of sadness, and turned toward the kitchen. She walked away, leaving Valera standing in stunned silence. He wanted to call out to her, to stop her, but he couldn't. He just stood there, watching her retreat, feeling his heart break all over again. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Katya broke the silence. "You know, Buttercup, I'm proud of you," she said, her voice steady and warm. "You've been through so much, but you didn't break. You're a real hero." Inna smiled softly. "Thank you, Katya. But I couldn't have done it without you." Katya scoffed lightly. "Oh, you'd have managed. You're stronger than you think. But I'm glad I was here with you." Inna turned her gaze back to the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, as if nature itself was celebrating the close of another day. A sense of calm began to settle within her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was ready for it. She was ready to live. And at that moment, as she watched the sunset, Inna realized that, despite everything she had endured, life could still be beautiful. She stood there now, the same Inna he had once betrayed, abandoned, and left alone to face the walls of a prison. The same woman whose life he had shattered. But this Inna was different. Stronger. Confident. And now, the savior of his daughter. "Inna!" Valera's voice quivered as he spoke, the disbelief clear in his tone. He couldn't trust his own eyes. She wasn't the same. The woman he had once known no longer existed. In her place was someone who had walked through fire and emerged more formidable than ever. Inna looked at him, her face calm yet unreadable. But in her eyes, there was an unmistakable depth of pain. She didn't say a word, just lowered her gaze. There was nothing she needed to say. Her expression alone spoke volumes. "Valera, do you know her?" Karina asked, still cradling her child in her arms. Her voice was filled with curiosity and surprise. Valera froze, the words stuck in his throat. How could he explain that the woman who had just saved his daughter's life was his ex-wife? How could he tell her that he was the one who had ruined her life? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sensing his hesitation, Inna decided to take control of the situation. "We used to know each other," she said quietly, her voice calm but tinged with a faint tremor. "A long time ago." Karina looked at her, then at Valera, trying to piece together the fragments of a story she didn't yet know. But before she could ask another question, Inna had already turned to the manager. "I need to get back to the kitchen," she said firmly. "There's still a lot of work to do." The manager nodded, still shaken by the dramatic events. "Of course, Inna. And thank you. You're a real hero today."